Okay, here we are, mission number 9 in the Vergeev Group campaign for DCS Blackshark. I'm going to go ahead and go through my startup sequence, and we'll hear what our mission is today here shortly.
Respond 233. 233 responding now. Good morning 233. The weather today is somewhat better than yesterday. The visibility allows to accomplish the objectives provided to you at headquarters. Repeating, follow the route and close all controls. Coordinates of planned targets to be reported upon return. The rest in startup mode. Report upon defining the targets. Execute the instructions obtained. Don't cross the border. You're gonna be shot down. Pilot reasonably and avoid unjustified maneuvers. Bad weather never forgives reckless flying in the mountains. In specific situations, request my instructions and act accordingly. Do not engage into battle without my consent. Do you copy 233?
Naval 233, copy that. Operation according to plan. Close all controls. Find planned targets. Report coordinates to headquarters upon return. Border crossing and entering battle is forbidden.
Confirming 233. The route is open now. Start up.
Naval 233, starting the mission. Take off.
Okay. Let me just finish my startup here. And so you guys didn't see the briefing, but basically what we're doing is we've got some ground teams that we need to know where they are for future missions, and check in with them basically is what our mission is. And they're a bit hard to find the first time you fly this mission, but they are definitely there, and you need to check in with each one, and they're really close to the border, and that's what our mission is today. So I'm going to finish the startup here and just tweak some settings, and we'll get going. There's somebody else somewhere around here. Since I know I'm going to be going low to check in with these teams, I'm going to make sure that my radar altimeter warning is set. I'm going to set it to around 10. And we've got our HUD. I'm going to change the color of that. And we're good to go. Okay, so of course we're dealing with more weather, naturally, and we're going to be flying in the mountains, and those two things together can spell disaster. very easily and quickly. So the low-speed maneuvering that we practiced in those convoy escort missions is really going to come in handy. Again, I like to zoom all the way in so I know that I'm going to be hitting these waypoints, and I'm not going to use the route mode just because there's more than 6 waypoints in most of the missions, and what's the point of using it for the first 6 and then just having to fly the rest manually? Plus it's good practice, so I just fly without route mode most of the time, unless we're over the water, which we're going to go over the water here in a second, but we're coming right back to the land and headed for that border waypoint that's right there on the border on the coast. So again, I've recorded this a few different times, and if I repeat something that I've said before, I apologize, but it's just the nature of the beast, I guess. Otherwise, I'd have to script these narrations, and I have no interest in doing that. Okay, we got that one. Yeah, you got to be careful on this turn. It's really easy to take a dive right into the water. And I'm going to stay out over the water a little bit because when we come up to that waypoint right there on the border on the coast, it'll give us a little bit of room to line up for the turn with all this wind and weather so we don't blow over the border and get immediately shot down. Let's see if I can get my speed set. And I'll set the radar altimeter to around 75. So I'm going to set up my flares after I retrim. This button right here will change it into program mode, and this first number, if you set it to 5, it'll basically do 12, I think it's 12 groups of flares going out, and the 1 is going to mean 1 flare for each group, and then the third number is the time between each flare, and I'm going to set that also to 1 second, so it'll be flare, 1 second, flare, 1 second, on and on until 12. If you change this first number, this 5 to 0, it'll just keep doing that until you stop it. I also like to, we'll use that one this time, and then you just start, and then when you want it to stop, you hit stop. Hopefully we won't need it, but better safe than sorry, I guess, as they say. It's a relief to be back on the land. I was really getting pretty much over the whole flying over the ocean thing. See, I almost flew over the border there. You've got to be careful with this wind. I was taking that turn a little too hot. Okay, so I've got that waypoint. And then this next one, tries to kill you because if you notice the river there, which is the border, it's kind of, it's got different tributaries and stuff. And on the Abris, the red is the border, so you know which, you know where you are and where not to cross, but the river dips in up here. See? So if we were just to head straight, we'd cross over right about here. So you really have to, and besides, you have to hit this waypoint right there, and guess what's right there? A radio tower antenna thing. And it's basically right on top of it. So with the wind wants to blow you into it. You have to hit it, the steer point, and you just got to go right along next to it very carefully. All right, got it. And for the most part, you just have to get close enough to each waypoint that on the Abris, it automatically switches to the next waypoint, and you get that green line. But that's not always going to be close enough, so you can't really depend on the Abris in terms of whether or not you really hit your steer point. Although if you don't see the green line going to the next waypoint, you definitely didn't hit it. So just be aware of that. Well, I've made my way into the alpha access of the new IL-2 Stromovic, and, well, I don't know if disappointing is the right word. I mean, number one, it's an alpha build, which you really can't expect much there. And I wasn't expecting a lot to be done or finished, but I didn't realize that, and I could be wrong about this because I only just kind of jumped into it for a few minutes and jumped out, but it looks like the 3D cockpits aren't clickable. Again, I could be wrong about that, but that, I don't know, ever since the first clickable cockpit came out, you know, like, which was this Ka-50, it's hard to go back. It's hard to go back to a cockpit, even if it's 3D and 6 degrees of freedom and all that, if you can't interact with it. And it's like a total immersion killer for me now. We kind of get spoiled by, you know, by the clickable cockpits on DCS, and it's like you have to expect that in every other product, which I guess isn't very realistic, but hopefully I'm wrong about that and I just screwed up some settings or something, but I'll have to give it another go and maybe check in on the forums and ask, you know, just ask outright, are they clickable? What am I doing wrong? I mean, if they're going to take the time to do the physics and all of that to make that so good, and then not have it, it seems like all that effort for the immersion and to not have a clickable cockpit just doesn't make sense to me. But I guess it's easy to criticize others when you're not doing the work, and I know that clickable cockpits are a lot of work. So who knows, if they're not in there now, maybe they will be in the future. Okay, our first ground team that we've got to check in with is in the mountains, of course, but it's 1 or 2 waypoints away from where we are now. This one's tricky. The wind is going to try to blow you over the border. You've got to be careful. Sometimes it's hard to hit that waypoint. I mean, you're so worried about not getting over the border that you miss it, and then you have to go back, and better to do it right the first time, I guess. All right, I'm going to turn off my radar altimeter and just fly by the seat of my pants, so to speak. So it's really easy to get disoriented back here, obviously. All these ravines and everything. Sometimes you'll think you're, if something else is happening that distracts you, and then you sort of get done with whatever that was, and you think you're in one place and you're not. It's good to always reference the abris to know where your position is at all times, pretty much. Just checking all the instruments all the time is a good practice. Speed, altitude, vertical velocity indicator. Okay, so I think that our first team is coming up on the side of this hill right in front of us on the left where those lights are, but a little bit closer to the border. So I'm going to get down pretty close and also haul ass through here, because remember in Mission 6 there's some AAA around here that we definitely don't want to get mixed up with, at least from this position. So, usually you want to stay on the flight path, like we've talked about before, but in the mission briefing, it shows you where these groups are, and this one is sort of not.
Group below, provide your name. The group below, provide your name. Group below, give your name or I will engage your weapons.
Shark, we are friends. This is war on one. 233, this is war on one.
Naval, 233, war on one here. Continuing with the plan.
Naval, I read you 233. Next time at ease, carefully and tactfully. Over.
Alright, so we kind of got we got a little bit too aggressive the way that we contacted the team, apparently. So he was just telling us to chill out and be a little more professional. But as I was saying before we got interrupted there, that the team was not along the flight path, and it was over to the right, closer to the border. And as you're heading to find that team, it's like you're heading straight across the border if you keep going in that direction. So you just have to constantly, you've got a plan. You've got to have a plan that, okay, this guy's right along the border. I'm going to be coming in from this heading, and so if I fly right over it and don't turn, I'm going to be headed right over the border. You just have to plan these things, and it's a lot of fun in the beginning because you're like, well, I know it's right there, and you don't see them yet, and of course you're turning around and hovering and looking, and it's all good fun. There's 3 of these ground teams that we need to hook up with, so that's one down. You could use night vision goggles on this one. Usually they'll tell you, while you're doing your startup, that they'll remind you to switch out your headgear and get the NVGs, but this time they don't remind you, and you don't really need it. It depends on if how dark your display is and whether or not you've got it calibrated properly. You can always just brighten it up a little bit, but this.
Group below, name yourself.
Chopper, that's war on 2. How is the weather up there?
War on 2, it's almost right here. Naval, 233, war on 2, checked out.
Okay, so that was Voron 2. And Voron 3 is up here further, like, I don't know, 5 or so kilometers. So You know, it's good to also pay attention to your barometric altitude, because this whole time since we basically hit our first group, we've been climbing, and it's sometimes hard to realize that when you're sort of up and down over the terrain. You don't realize that sort of average overall, you know, you've climbed 500 feet, which affects the performance of the engines, as you'll... Okay, I'm sitting here talking too much. I'm missing my steer points. Let's get this one. So yeah, the altitude, when you start getting up there, it starts affecting the performance of your engines. And the first few times I flew this mission, I could not reach this last team on the ground. I couldn't do it. It's like I'd get into a vortex ring state, or it was just really difficult for me. And it's because one of the reasons is our altitude. So a tip here is to use your momentum to get to this last team. I mean, in retrospect, you really don't have to do that if you know what you're doing, but if you're a new pilot, that's the way I suggest you go about it. You really want to get some speed going, and then you're going to hit that waypoint and turn right around. Also, this particular team is kind of closer to the river, so I'm going to move off the flight panel a little bit. Keep my speed up. I think they're right around here somewhere. Or not. You can always catch them on the flip side. So when we turn around up here, we'll search for them. You know, it might look easy when you're watching the video to get this steer point, but if you're new, it may look easy, and once you're used to, you know, once you understand how everything works, it will be easy, but at first it's not.
Control 5. Terrain mountains in front. Continuing to the plan.
All right, we got to find this third team. We passed them up. Sometimes this third team can be tricky to find. You got to get low. I know they're right around here.
Hey, down there. Identify yourself. Down there. Repeating. Name yourself. Repeating last time. Name yourself or I will open the fire.
The hell is you? Walkie-talkie. Shit, hello. The hell is you? Walkie-talkie sold through. We're changing the batteries. Go fly a kite, damned pilot. We nearly had shit into our pants.
If you don't name yourself,
This is Warren 3. Warren 3. Go to hell, damned pilot. Fuck off.
Hello, got you. Going to hell. Naval 233. 1-3 found. Over.
Okay, so it sounds like that team had a little bit too much vodka or something, so basically now we just have to fly the flight plan home and get back in our parking space, and we're done. There's one other thing up here that we have to check out, which should be coming up here shortly. That beep, beep, beep you heard was an overspeed. So, you know, now we're going down in altitude this whole time, and it's easy to accidentally overspeed the engines. That's what that beeping was.
Naval 233 here. Observing group of armed people and vehicles between 3rd and 4th zones in Georgian side. They are on their side but close to the border. How do you copy, Naval? Naval, do you copy? This is 233.
233, Naval reading you. Stay in the area. No action so far. Don't engage into fight. Await instructions.
233, roger that. Waiting for instructions.
Okay, so we just have to come to a hover here, and I suggest you switch to barometric altimeter hold. Because of the undulating terrain, it'll drive you crazy trying to get the right hover. And we just have to hang out here and find those guys that apparently we saw. Let me come to a hover here. You know, the tricky part is getting the hover right. The winds are particularly nasty right in this area. So, I mean, again, I've done it a million times, so I can usually get it, but it's going to be difficult if you're a new pilot. You don't have to get a visual on this group of people across the border. I've found them once or twice. They're somewhere very close to the river, and if you bring NVG goggles, you'll have a better chance finding them, but it's not essential to actually get a visual on them. So we just wait. The reason that the radar altimeter mode, auto mode, doesn't work well in the mountains is because if you're, you know, like on a hillside, every little move that you make, that altitude in relation to the actual surface of the ground is going to be constantly changing because it's sloped. And because of that, you know, the autopilot system is going to be using that 20% plus, 20% minus power range that it can use for the collective. And you know, when you finally trim out for your hover and then engage the hover, well, you've trimmed it for the collective power being, you know, at a certain spot, and then it changes because of the slope of the hill, and then you're not going to be able to stay in your hover. So that can get really frustrating, and it took me a long time to figure that one out. So hopefully if you get anything from this mission, it'll be that.
Naval 233, requesting instructions. Naval 233.
233, Naval, give me a picture.
Naval 233, affirmative. On the Georgian side, on junction of zones 3 and 4, observing armed people up to squads, armed with machine guns and RPG, transported by 2 jeeps and 1 truck, watching into our direction.
233, Naval copies you. Await instructions. Over.
Looks like we whacked out our standby ADI here. If you want to reset that, just right click. And reset it. Or if you just want to cage it, just right click and scroll forward and let go, and it'll cage it. Then you can even turn it off. That thing bugs me so.
233, Naval, continue with primary objective.
Naval 233. Repeat, Naval. Repeat, please.
233, proceed with main objective. Your picture received. Continue on the job. How do you copy 233?
Naval 233, reads that all. Proceeding with primary.
Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and call it on this mission because you just have to RTB at this point, but you be sure to hit your steer points or you won't make it to the next mission. So I'll catch up with you guys in the next mission.